I am unpacking my library. Yes, I am. The books are not yet on the shelves, not yet touched by the mild boredom of order. I cannot march up and down their ranks to pass them in review before a friendly audience. You need not fear any of that. Instead, I must ask you to join me in the disorder of crates that have been wrenched open, the air saturated with wood dust, the floor covered with torn paper, to join me among piles of volumes that are seeing daylight again after 2 years of darkness, so that you may be ready to share with me a bit of the mood. Certainly not an elegiac mood, but rather one of anticipation, which these books arose in a genuine collector. For such a man is speaking to you. And on closer scrutiny, he proves to be speaking only about himself. These are the opening words of Unpacking My Library, a talk about book collecting. It's a 1931 essay by Walter Benjamin, who was a German Jewish writer, theorist, associated with the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, and who offered some of the most compelling essays that have been really influential in the last third of the 20th century in theory and academic work more generally. So I wanted to read this essay for this episode of Textual Life as I myself am unpacking my library. And I thought about the title because of this essay, who I was introduced to by a great friend who I want to dedicate this episode to, Assad Haider. He recently passed, but it was Assad who first introduced me to Walter Benjamin, to critical theory more generally, while we were students in Paris. And the first essay I think he introduced me to was a different one called The Storyteller. Not too long after that, Art in the Age of Mechanical Reproduction. But before I go too down the road of a tangent, I want to introduce my guest for this episode, Mamadou Diallo.
Hi,
Mamadou,
Wendell.
introduce yourself.
So I'm Mamadou Diallo, PhD candidate at Columbia University at the MISAS department, Middle Eastern, South Asian, and African Studies. I'm from Senegal, Dakar, where I met Wendell, and we've been in conversation ever since. It's been now 10 years.
11, yeah.
11 years. I think I need to do some catch up with the content of his library. I knew quite a lot of what constitutes his references. And I happened to be in Morocco as he's unboxing his stuff. So can't wait to see what comes out of these boxes.
So this is the scenario. I've moved to Ben Guerir, Morocco, to take a job as Associate Professor of African Literature and Philosophy at Mohammed VI Polytechnic University. And I just got my books. It was about 3 months since I last saw them in Montclair, New Jersey. They crossed the Atlantic. They went to Spain first, and then, as far as I understand it, they sat in customs for at least a month before they saw the light of day. And so I'm so excited and pleased to have them. And so I feel really lucky to have Mamadou here to be with me as I unpack my library. And here, unpacking is quite literal. It's not figurative.
Yeah.
So should we get to it?
Yeah, let's do that.
All right. So how many books do you think this is, Mamadou?
I can't really tell. Each box, I suppose, could get something close to 20. How many boxes do you have here?
So there are, I think, 52, 53 boxes.
Like, would that make 1,000 to
I don't
2,000
think
books?
I don't think it's 1,000
I don't know,
books.
20,
I don't
50
think it's
boxes,
1,000.
20 books per
Oh
boxes,
wow.
you know.
Yeah, I was supposed to do an inventory.
Okay, 1,000 boxes, 1,000 books, potentially 1,000 books.
I was supposed to do an inventory to get through customs, but I couldn't bring myself to count the books before I left, let alone to actually do an inventory with titles, authors, and ISBN numbers.
Yeah, it's work.
But I guess I paid the price for not doing that because I think that's what held up the books.
Maybe we can start now, actually. Not just, but keep some sort of
Yeah, might as
inventory
well.
as we go ahead.
Yeah, might as well.
Do you have like, did you put them in boxes according to some kind of logic, or you just?
They were kind of in relation to where they sat. So at home, we had our home library, my wife Jamila and I, and my office. And the thing is, she's been really set on keeping our books segregated. So her books are actually, I think, have her initial on it. And so all of these are not mine.
Okay.
Per se. So some of them have office books and some of them don't have anything, and so those were home. But the distinction even between that, I think we'll probably see doesn't even hold up. But we'll see. But one thing I did want to say about the books being customs, a little story. So it was held up for about a month and it finally came through, and the moving company said that I should feel lucky.
Why so?
Because I didn't have the residency paperwork, and with this amount of books, I had to demonstrate that it wasn't for commercial purposes.
Yeah.
But more importantly, without an inventory, they, I guess, had to inspect it.
Yeah.
And apparently, they cut out 2 pages
Wow.
from 2 of the books.
That's very interesting.
And these are pages that had offensive material, apparently, and that was representations of the integrity of Morocco's territory.
Okay.
And so I think that was maybe an early lesson I had in the meaning of sovereignty.
Yeah.
So I'm as we're looking, I'm really eager to find out which 2
book? Yeah.
books were torn out. But it leaves so many questions, right? Do they open up all the books, all the boxes, or they just randomly
crazy.
open up?
Yeah.
How did they determine
Yeah.
that where the offensive books were going to be? But anyway, been talking too much. Let's get into books. So let's open up box number 40 from my office. Uh-oh.
It starts well.
You see how it begins,
It
right?
starts at Misas.
It starts at home in the Misas, right? Want to read us the title?
Colonizing Egypt by Timothy Mitchell.
Mitchell is one of the heavy hitters from Misas, and this is I would say one of the very core texts of anyone who takes a course in Misas.
Was this the outcome of his dissertation?
I think it was. I'm pretty sure.
It reads like it.
Yeah, like a first book, and
Yeah.
the ideas evolve over the work. So I think in one of the key concepts in colonizing Egypt is I think something like enfrainment or something like that, and then later on enfrainment becomes staging. So he talks about the stage of modernity. So it does have those kind of first book dissertation of book traces, but I mean, if you can write a dissertation book like this, then
there's a lot about urbanism also. Shaping spaces, urban spaces. Yeah.
You took a class with him, right?
I did, which was
class was that?
It was very simply titled Colonialism, and it really explored the common origins of the corporation, the modern corporation, and the colonial state
Yeah.
as growing out of the same kind of early modern institutions, the chartered company. So it started there and evolved into science and technology studies.
Okay.
Yeah, amazing work.
So in some ways, it's the book itself, right? The book is colonizing Egypt, and so the course is that, but so much more.
Yeah.
How he thinks about it years later.
Yeah.
Then we have this book, The Call of Bilal, Islam in the African Diaspora, Edward Curtis. It's a textbook on kind of Islam in the African world. I used this early on in some of my teaching, this course, Islam and the African American Experience, but I should go back to that. Looks like this box is mostly papers.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the boxes that I had where I emptied the filing cabinet. And so these are a lot of printouts. Roland Barthes, Mythologie.
You have this little leaflet, pamphlet, Portugal's war in Africa.
I think those were some of the...
International Defense and Aid Fund for Southern Africa,
Yeah. So
1971.
So this was a political pamphlet. So I think in the library of the Institute for African Studies at Columbia, there were a bunch of books that were being thrown out, and I just couldn't bear
Yeah, you got
seeing
this
them
one.
thrown out. Oh, I have some books from Senegalese author. Do you know him? Mamadou Yuri Sall?
The name rings a bell.
Mamadou Yuri Sall is a very interesting scholar at Gaston Berger University in Saint Louis. He's an economist by training, huh? Let me see, which one is that?
The book is in Pular.
Yeah.
Cerno Suleimani Bal, Cincudo Almamia.
Yeah. So this is the Torodo Revolution from 1776. And this book is by the same author, but it's in Arabic. Maqdurat Khariji al-Azhar Tahlil al-Bayanat wa al-Muwaqif al-Senegalia. So this is about the kind of the students who studied abroad at Al-Azhar Mosque in Cairo. So this is like a data analysis of who those students are, right? So it's very much like a work of an economist, but it's in Arabic. This book is in Pular. So he's interesting because he's the head of an organization called, what is it called? I'm forgetting what it's called. Was it Bajordo? It's an organization that's trying to valorize the Pular and Arabic tradition of Futa Toro. And so he's published a lot. But these were actually gifts directly from him. He's a very generous, great scholar. And he's one of these people who I think are just really interesting intellectuals, right? Because this isn't even necessarily his field, but he's just writing in multiple languages and on topics of great importance. Yeah, so these are kind of little books. Oh, I know you like this one.
I think it's. I read it when I was quite young. Carl Schmitt's The Concept of the Political, and as
we read that together?
We read it again in Saint Louis, and as with all those very central concepts of modernity that have become almost second nature to us, we barely ever wonder what is it that they mean and what is it that they refer to, right? They became self-evident. And then I remember I was taking a class with a political philosopher, Thierry Ménissier, who specialized in Machiavelli. And we had to write a paper on the nature of the political, right? And so I read Carl Schmitt. And what was very interesting is that, in a way, the answer it provided to this question of what is the political, right, was counterintuitive, given the hegemony of liberal discourse. And at the same time, it had some kind of clarity that I found very interesting. So yeah, important text, not without its controversies, as you know.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. What's the controversy?
The individual And the fact that he had his card, I think, of the Nazi party.
Right.
Is this going here?
Yeah, so those are just papers. Let's just leave them in that box for now. This is a good one. Sven Lindquist, who I know you know.
Yeah.
But this is his Dig Where You Stand. And so it's really great for like researching the job site and thinking of the job site as a site of inquiry. And so it actually was the start of a whole movement of historical research. I think they call them barefoot researchers or something like that.
Never heard of this one.
It's really good. It's a really nuts and bolts practical guide of how to investigate your job
workplace
as a way of understanding power. So this is one of those books, I know it's important, haven't read it yet, but Modern Religion, Modern Race, Theodore Vial.
Is this recent?
I want to say 7 or 8 years or something. Uh-oh. What about that one?
We had very generative seminar around this text, The Undercommons, by Stefano Arni and Fred Moten.
Yeah. Fugitive Planning and Black Study. Yeah, so we were in a reading group together of the group d'Action d'études de critique in 2020, in that we were kind of doing a localized French Wolof translation of this book. And so the whole concept wasn't about producing the translation so much as slowing us down and really trying to create a shared language amongst ourselves. You know, recently there was this Fanon colloquium that you was the lead organizer on, and at that colloquium, Abdurrahman Sak, he quoted Moten and Harney a few times about, I guess it was about the university and our relationship to the university. And so that was a very proud moment for me. Because here we were at this colloquium that, you know, you led the organization of, and then Abdu was really taken off with GAEC, is you know, referring back as a core reference, Moten and Harney, who aren't necessarily in the Francophone space. There aren't necessarily references in the Francophone space as far as I...
You brought the text to us, and you know, I remember when we were reading it, like I did have my reservations about it. There is something about the prose and that I was somehow like reticent about. But actually, there is something that I got from it that has stuck with me.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of refusing what has been refused to us. And I think that is something that I'm actually very attached to.
Yeah. Why is that?
It's a kind of I just realized that, you know, that's the opposite of what the Cameroonian philosopher Fabien Eboussi-Boulaga called in an essay le nousocisme, right? Which is, I think, a strong tendency in Black thought ever since the late 19th century.
Okay, you know, you have to tell us, what is this nousocisme?
You know, the nousocisme is like, we too have philosophy, you know, which mostly consists in claiming what has been refused to us. Civilization, writing, what else? Like urban life. Yeah. You know, and I think there is something interesting in actually doing the opposite, refusing what has been refused to us. Yeah. Which is an even stronger stance of independence, I think.
This is something I take from Toni Morrison too, right? That famous 1975 lecture of hers, a humanist view, right?
Yeah.
She says, you
Yeah.
know, they say you don't have history, so you spend 30 years proving that you do.
Yeah.
They say your head is too small, and so you spend another 20 years proving that you do. But I'm here to tell you, she says, you don't have to do any of that.
Yeah.
You can speak to me. I am right here, right?
Yeah.
And it's like so liberating when you make that move.
Yeah, the whole distraction thing.
Yes, right. Yeah, that's the speech. It comes from that.
So
Racism is a distraction.
So I guess that is part of what the African American tradition has to offer us as an insight also. At least it has been articulated, developed in a strong way by important interventions, you know, over the last decades, right? Because you find it in Toni Morrison,
Yeah.
you have it here in Fred Moten and Stéphane O'Harney,
Yeah.
and I think it's strong. It's actually very, very, very liberating.
Can you think of an African intellectual who's made a similar kind of argument?
I mean, I guess the critique of Nouzocisme by Eboussi Boulaga goes there. And I think it saves us from a lot of dead ends and anachronisms. And it actually allows us to value difference.
Whose difference?
Our differences.
Just among us or collectively?
Collectively, but also the differences between time periods, to acknowledge, to acknowledge ruptures in history. Because if not, everything is just like a whole continuum, transcultural, transhistorical. Everybody has civilization, everybody has philosophy. Yeah.
I think this question of rupture is fundamental, especially when we're trying to think about blackness globally. If we're trying to think across Africa, diaspora, etc. The relationship to rupture is a real important point of divergence, because I think those situated on the continent are often better positioned to claim continuity. Whether that's true or not is one thing, but at least there's the semblance of continuity. Whereas for those of us in the diaspora, it is almost impossible to claim continuity, right? Of course, you had that whole trend of thought. That's exactly what they're trying to establish, right? That's survivals and retentions, right? And so you have, even within diasporic thought, these divergences, right? Some who say, no, there is an Africanity that has been transmitted and maintained.
Yeah.
But probably the dominant position, or the more popular position today, is the one that says, no, the rupture was definitive, and we're all the better for it, because it required us to be inventive.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
I think that's an interesting proposition. And what I would be interested in is to, inventive out of what? Out of the rupture from Africa, but also what's the relationship to the West, into that rupture? The rupture is definitive, the rupture with Africa, I suppose. But then, or is it just like this idea of a space within modernity that is the Black Atlantic or the Black world, right? That is a space of its own, that looks at like hegemonic modernity with a critical eye, Well,
I think it's rupture with tradition and the traditional, right? So it's not so much Africa as content, but just, I'm thinking about this Arthur Jaffa talk. I think I shared it with you at one point, where he's trying to understand Black music, and he makes the claim that music in traditional African settings, because it's so tied to power, isn't necessarily Black music.
That's
right? So he makes this a unconventional argument, I think, at least from more
It's
mainstream.
a good argument. I mean, it starts well.
Yeah.
I think.
Why?
Yeah.
What makes it good?
I think power is always important, and relation to power are always fundamental. I guess, without investigating it further, it sounds plausible, indeed.
And the other part of it was the inventive, right? So the being tied to power in his argument, it wasn't as free to be inventive, whereas the rupture of modernity, of the hold, was one that actually broke the relationship to power, which conditioned, or were the conditions for new possibilities.
Although one will have to ask whether it is true that black music in the New World was, not in many ways tied to power. The plantation and the house of the master, and the slave musician.
Say more.
As you had specialized slaves, or talented slaves, that played music for social events for the white masters, with instruments that were very often provided by the masters.
Yeah.
And is that part of that tradition, or of the tradition of black music, or not?
And moreover, the instruments themselves.
Yeah, the instruments themselves.
The instruments themselves. Now, the conventional argument here has been, of course, that there's the whole practice of signifying, right? That how on the surface, someone's making a joke that is self-deprecating, right? But actually, the joke is on a white audience. And it's this way of communicating that is always ambiguous and operating at multiple, sometimes contradictory levels. So even if they're playing for white masters, quote unquote, it's something else's.
Yeah, but that's where you can ask Arthur Jaffa, why is it the same then with African musicians playing for the bour or the damel, or I guess you'll have to decide whether you edit this or not. But I've heard the same person, just dismissed relations to Africa by saying that they sold us.
Right. So now we're getting to real topics. So what do you make of that argument?
I don't know. I think the argument is interesting. One will have to, if you want to make arguments that are more or less substantiated by historical evidence, that are more or less strong, or like an historical argument, one will have to look into it more in detail.
Yeah. Is Arthur Jaffa making historical arguments, though?
No. But what kind of argument is he making then? But here's the thing. Those sort of discussions very often have to do with what one wants to do in the future, and what kind of community, what kind of future community one is interested in, more so than whatever happened in the past.
Okay.
It's more about that, I think.
Okay. I got you. And on that, I think this book is pretty interesting and relevant for that conversation about which usable paths one mobilizes or don't for which imagined community.
R.A. Judy.
Yes, sir. You know that one?
Forming the American Canon.
Disforming
the American Canon. When was this published?
I want to say 92.
Okay.
92.
Paying careful attention to the problem of translation and canon formation.
Yeah, this is a very important book. It's been very influential for me. Certainly, R.A. Judy was someone who sharpened his analytical might, critical, theoretical might in a reading group, first and foremost. As a high school student in Minneapolis, he eventually goes to Al-Azhar, as we were just talking about, in Cairo. And then he studies deconstruction and back in Minnesota. But, you know, this was, according to some versions of Black studies, appears at a fork in the road, along with Gilroy's The Black Atlantic. And I think it's Corey Walker who makes the argument that, you know, in 1992, there were two options. Just forming the American canon, which was an argument against canonizing a Black literature, and one that referred to life worlds that were not limited to European thought. And so the use of the Bilali manuscript from Sapelo Island, Georgia, which Judy uses, allows him to do that, versus Gilroy's Black Atlantic, which is really within, very much within a kind of Western thought.
Yeah, very interesting. I like this one.
Oh, which one is that?
Niall Green's Sufism, A Global History. Small book, very useful for a Senegalese, I think.
Why is it Senegalese?
I mean, because we tend to think of whatever goes on in, or like a lot of what constitutes Senegalese Islam is understood regionally as something very peculiar to Senegal, whereas Niall Green's like small, short text, which covers a huge area and a long span of time, actually shows developments that are quite analogous to what we've seen unfold in Senegal in the 20th century.
Speaking of Sufism and its global history, I think actually these two books are worth mentioning.
So The Walking Quran by Rodolphe T. Ware, and Beyond Timbuktu, An Intellectual History of Muslim West Africa. Yeah, they hang together somehow.
Yeah, they deserve
they
to be on the
partake.
shelf, kind of, on
Yeah.
the same shelf for sure.
Yeah. How would you characterize those? For me, a part of what they do is, how to put it, like make strong arguments for the Islamicity of West Africa. Not just as a recent phenomenon, but as something that has a deep past. And furthermore, like, you know, in West Africa being not the periphery of Islam, but a center.
In academic terms, without question, we can say that they open up to an entire new field, you know.
And I guess two differences. Maybe a difference would be, from my memories of them, that Usman Khan is very interested into the question of what is the African intellectual tradition and broadening the scope of it beyond Europhone texts, right? Beyond the tradition that goes from, I don't know, like the Harlem Renaissance, Négritude, up to, let us say, Achille Mbembe. And like remind us all that there has been thinkers, women and men of letters that actually worked within the Arabic script and from within the tradition of Islam. So a very an intervention into African debates. I would say. Whereas Rodolphe Ware is intervening maybe into another space, mostly.
I think he's intervening in an African, a diasporic one, kind of Islamic history, Middle Eastern studies. It's a very audacious and ambitious work that forces a lot of people into a conversation that weren't having conversation with each other. But, you know, I think his book has really successfully made those different fields speak to each other now. Oh, so this is my daughter Zora's book box for sure. These are all
You might
her
make
books.
you might make another episode with her.
Yeah. We'll do Unpacking My Library Zori edition. That's gonna be a fun one. Have you read this one?
No, I didn't. I read recently The Invention of Africa
By Valentin Mudimbe.
by Mudimbe. I wouldn't say it's one of my classics.
Invention of Africa.
Yeah.
Why not?
I think it makes an important argument, but the text itself is not didn't really speak to me.
Yeah.
It's about style.
Allah Yarhamu, first of all, let's say the recently passed.
Yeah.
Mudimbe. I mean, it is a difficult text. Stylistically, it's very dense.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, you know, he's definitely made a mark on the field. And, you know, recently I was doing a author meets critics at the African Studies Association in Atlanta. And Mauro Nobili, who's a historian, kind of Muslim Africa, Islamic Africa, you know, he pointed out about how profoundly Mudimbian my arguments are in Textual Life, my recently published book. And he kind of said it to pose the question, why aren't you engaging more with Mudimbe? And for me, it was so you know, it was so obvious that, like, of course this is Mudimbe. That actually I realized that, I don't actually explicitly frame the work as an engagement with Mudimbe because it's so fundamentally a part of my thinking.
Yeah.
But something that kind of happened at such an early stage, you know, this idea of Africa as kind of subject to the constructions that constituted the rupture that we were talking about before. That even though there was a rupture, and he's arguing and trying to get us to see that and how that works out on the continent itself. But this book, we didn't even say the title, right? It's Parables and Fables, Exegesis, Textuality, and Politics in Central Africa. It's an earlier work that he writes. I think he writes it before Invention of Africa, if I'm not mistaken. Right? It's 91. Maybe it comes out around the same time. But it's him doing close readings.
Yeah.
And I think it's not as well known, but I think it's very useful text if you have the patience for a kind of Jesuit style of academic, scholastic writing.
It has been translated recently in French, The Invention of Africa. Professor Diouf, the historian Mamadou Diouf, was involved, I think, into bringing that text into French for the first time.
No, but it was originally...
It was published in French, in English at first.
No, at first it was there was a book, I'm forgetting the French title, but Mudimbe published a book in the mid to late 80s. So The Invention of Africa comes out 88, if I'm not mistaken. He publishes a book, and then Mudimbe translates it in French and translates it into English, and The Invention of Africa is the product of that translation. However, the changes and what he adds to the invention from that first book, I think, were so great that it warranted a translation back into French, if I recall correctly. So we've made it through a bunch of boxes, not so many. We've only talked about a fraction that we've passed our hands over, and I think we've only made it through 6 or 7 so far. So they've all really been mostly very academic books so far, right? Oh, there we go. We got some fiction. I had a feeling. This was gonna get us some fiction.
Rushdie,
Rushdie. Hope that's not too embarrassing.
Noureddin Farah. That's quite the cover. Oh, I love the title.
You gotta describe it for our listeners.
So here is this little tiny green with a black and white photography of a person in a white dress sitting on top of a bed with a lit cigarette staring at the camera. And the title is There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyoncé. The author is Morgan Parker. That's enticing.
Yeah, you should take a look at that.
It's a book of poetry.
When's the last time you read poetry, though? It couldn't have been recently. You're trying to finish a dissertation.
Ages ago.
Yeah.
I have to confess, not very much a poetry reader.
Classic, right?
Yes, Ousmane Sembène. I recently heard a conversation between Antoine Djabé and a Guinean journalist. I forgot her name, unfortunately, and she was complaining about the space that is given to Ousmane Sembène in relation to his film on Samori Touré.
Mm-hmm.
And she was calling for her fellow Guineans to do the same kind of to give the same kind of space Senegalese are giving Ousmane Sembène to their literary and
who in
artistic
particular
figures.
Does she have in mind?
Someone like Djibril Tamsir Niane, I think, the historian, and other people, right, filmmakers and so on. But yeah, Ousmane Sembène looms very large.
Mm-hmm. Not without reason.
Yeah, I agree.
What's your favorite Sembène film?
I think I like Khala.
Yeah.
I like Khala.
I think that might have been the first African film I ever
You've ever
saw.
seen?
Yeah. Again, I think I was studying in France in a post-colonial literature class. And I think we saw that.
In a way, Khala and like his novel, The Last of the Empire, Le Dernier de l'Empire, are very important to my imagination of Senegal.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I cannot go through Place de l'Indépendance in Dakar and pass the Chamber of Commerce and not think about, with some degree of what feels like a deep understanding of the moment of decolonization.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Where basically you have this very comical scene, you know, where the French are dramatically kicked out and replaced by these men in very cheap, supposedly African clothing, and they storm and they take down the bust of the marionette and, you know, put in and you know, it's just to this day, like that is profoundly frames my understanding of that moment. Did you study Sembène in school?
No, I didn't go to Senegalese school. I went to French school.
And they didn't study Sembène in French schools?
No.
How is that even possible?
It wasn't in the curriculum.
You think would he be in it now with the calls for decolonization?
I feel like, you know, it also depends on teachers can make choices. They have some latitudes to include certain authors or not, I think. And I'm pretty sure in parts of France today there are kids that are exposed to Sembène. Not many, but I'm sure there are.
So at this point I'm just taking books out, but if anything captures your eye while we're putting these on the shelves.
An anthology of short stories by Felwine Sarr, 105 Rue Carnot. I think when Felwine started publishing in the late 2000s, early 2010s, I feel like it was really a moment where he appeared as a new and important voice, a new and important intellectual voice in Senegalese letters and intellectual life in general. And I'm particularly fond of his first text, the one that
Daesh?
was published just before this one. Yeah, Daesh.
Daesh. What do you like about that one?
It had all these short stories about a returnee from France in Senegal. And it had this sort of cahier d'un retour au pays natal theme that ran through the different stories. And it raised a lot of important questions, I think, on the contradictions of Senegal and Senegalese life.
For example?
All the things related to religion, the space that is given to individuals to explore their individualities or not, the role played by, how to put that in English, social pressures to conform, and what it means to actually express one's individuality in that society. And just to speak up, about certain things, right?
And he's gone on to write. He's like very prolific, it seems. And
I guess he decided to have a cultural impact, and he's been working towards that.
Right. So I don't really have any sense of organization or order. I'm just kind of throwing books up at this point.
So you have the Hans Joas. You're not as fond as I am of it.
No, he's too German for me.
I love this book. I mean, it's useful. It's very useful.
So give us
And you
an
know what I
argument.
like about it?
Make the case.
What I like about this book, right?
What's the
I feel
name
like,
of it, by the way?
The Power of the Sacred.
Okay.
I feel like there is a brand of scholarship on this question, what I would say religion in modernity, that are written as if thinking about the question just had started. And there isn't enough attendance of previous efforts in thinking about the question, right? And what I like about this book basically is that it's a long commentary of previous interventions on the problem, of what is the meaning of religion, how to think of it in a social scientific way. But a social scientific way that is historical, not like trying to become an economist, surveys and so on. Yeah. And there is a critique that we found in post-secular literature of the sociology of religion that never really goes through the actual arguments that were made by those great sociologists of religion, whether Weber, Durkheim and so on. And Joas actually does that work.
So according to Joas, what is religion?
He doesn't answer that question in a way that I think is satisfactory. I think he just buries the problem deeper. He buries the problem deeper after acknowledging the problems with the concept of religion and its failure to actually be universalizable in an analytic way. But then he defers to the sacred as that thing that is to be found in every social formations. So the sacred, the numinous, and there he relies a lot on Durkheim. And ultimately there is a last chapter that is more programmatic and so on. But I like it as a way as an intellectual history, as a history of the social sciences.
Right.
Where would you put this one?
Going back to the Walter Benjamin essay, one of the themes of that essay is the place of collection and collections, specifically book collections, but even more broadly, as a mediation of order and disorder, right? And one of the things he says is that a collector's collection of books is actually chaotic. And you get the sense of the chaos of a book collection when you're unpacking it, right? It doesn't yet have its order, even if it had one before, right before it was packed. This is a moment when that order's interrupted. And so what we're in right now in this episode, in this conversation, is the disorder of the library, which is because I'm in this moment of transition. I'm in a new place with my family in this new place that we're exploring. And so I'm just throwing books on shelves at this point.
You also don't have enough shelves.
Yeah, so there's that. This is one of my favorite books, I think. I had a really disappointing moment when I was trying to finish and publish my book. I was trying to figure out, okay, how do I frame all this work I've done over the years? And so I was trying to write a book proposal. And there's this great book called The Book Proposal Book by Laura Portwood Stacer. And one of the recommendations she gives that other people give as well is look on your bookshelf and see what presses have published the books that you have. And for whatever reason, that wasn't working for me. So I said, let me just look at my dissertation, right? Because obviously my dissertation is a record of my thinking in graduate school. Mm-hmm. I was reading it. I was going through the bibliography of my dissertation, and I realized something. There wasn't a single book in my dissertation, at least not in the bibliography, that I loved.
Yeah.
Right. There wasn't a single book that just like I saw the title and it just, sparked joy. Right. And it was disappointing. This moment was disappointing. It was like, whoa, I spent 7 years. Yeah. Right. And I wrote this project. Yeah. And there wasn't a single work of these work. That's just how I spent my time. Yeah. There wasn't a single one that I was just a joy to read. However, this book, The Ignorant Schoolmaster, 5 Lessons in Intellectual Emancipation by Jacques Rancière, is a book that I absolutely love. Mm-hmm. And it is a book that I encountered in graduate school for the first time. Mm-hmm. And actually the last few months, I was taking the class with Gil Anijar, reading in theory, in parentheses. And I think you may have mentioned it on the first day, about how use the example of the main figure in this book, Jacques Jacquetot, who was this kind of he was a worker, he was an engineer, but he finds himself in a Flemish university, and he teaches law in a Flemish university without speaking Flemish. And he successfully teaches law in a language that he doesn't even understand, right? And Rancière tells the story of him to show actually there are 2 kinds of education, right? There's the emancipatory education in which the student comes to understand how to teach themselves. And then there's the stultifying education in which the student learns how to be subject to another's authority. And the best of an Enlightenment tradition, that was what Jacques Jacquetot and the kind of almost Jacobin legacy, right, was that the structures of authority and power central to a university are actually at their core anti-democratic. And, Rancière writes this at a moment in French debates about higher education and education more in general, to say that, look, parents don't have to be educated to teach their children. Workers don't have to be educated to educate themselves, right? And so it's a really emancipatory vision. And so when I think about looking back at that dissertation, it wasn't that I didn't read things that were interesting. It's that the structures of constraint of what we had to do didn't find themselves, I wasn't able to, for whatever reason, able to articulate them in such a way, to bring them together in such a way that where I could do the work that I was set to do within the frames I had available, while doing it in ways that did something for me. What's your experience been like as you're finishing up?
I feel like I'm taking time, in part, because I'm not being very, I don't know if it's pragmatic or disciplined, but I go on and read stuff that members of my committee will feel like are absolutely unrelated to what I'm writing, and yet I feel like I need to do that in my readings.
Why?
Because I come up with, I have a tendency to ask like very broad questions, maybe not very, which have to do maybe with the fact that what I studied before starting the PhD program was history.
Yeah.
And I find myself in need of tools that are beyond those of source criticism. I need to know a little bit about the basics when it comes to philosophical debates on universals and particulars. That tradition, I'm
Oh
curious
yeah,
about
you are
it.
going big, huh?
Yeah, like stuff like that. Just to get the basics about those things. And part of it has been fun. And when it comes to the field in which I'm making an intervention, I wouldn't say I don't like most of the text. I haven't found anything that I vibe with. But much of the more recent work is something that I didn't really enjoy.
Yeah.
And what I liked actually was rediscovering old scholarships from Senegal,
Like what?
like Abdoulaye Bara Diop, for instance, or early work from Momar Koumba Diop, or even early work from Mamadou. It's more like the excitement of learning things about a place that I'm deeply committed to and interested in,
Yeah.
where I've been immersed in, but having information of a moment where I wasn't around, of pockets of social life that I don't have access to, through that literature. But also seeing that there has been sustained effort at self-examination in the Senegalese university going on.
What does that do for you to see that?
Two things, right? One, I realized that we have references, we have things to take on and run with. And the second thing is also like that it really raises the question as to how to what is it with the university that has failed to affect broader society to that extent? There is something there, like failed opportunities, waste, lost, because I feel like there are really, really important work that should be more broadly known and that remains constrained into academic spaces. Like, for instance, the work of Abdoulaye Bara Diop. He started something, I think, that was important and started to ask like good questions in relation to Senegalese history. And a lot of it has been sort of left aside.
Which book do you have in mind?
La Société Wolof et la Famille Wolof, right?
And if you were pushed on giving an explanation of why there hasn't been an impact beyond academic spaces in Senegal, what would you say?
So I spoke to some of his students that went on to become important academics in their own right. What they told me is that in their teaching, they didn't teach their work. Right? They taught the fundamentals of their discipline. Right? But they didn't and what I find very, very interesting for someone like
So this would
Abdoulaye
have
Bara
been
Diop.
in sociology.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Abdoulaye Bara Diop did historical sociology. He didn't just do like empirical, synchronic work. He did actual historical sociology, which I think is essential. Every space must start with historical sociology.
When you say space here,
Cultural space.
okay.
Right? Every modern society, I think, benefits, and for all the disciplines, historians will benefit from it, anthropologists, whatever. Like, we need that effort that is failing, I guess, at come up with too broad generalizations and so on, but it draws a frame that becomes useful and also provides us with concepts with which we can
So to
work.
understand a space, one must begin with historical sociology.
Yeah, I feel like that move, which is both like conceptual and empirical, which is both about structures and becoming, right? And I think Abdoulaye Bara Diop did that and started to articulate.
Do you
concept.
think one could teach the fundamentals of sociology while also doing that historical sociological work from Abdoulaye Bara Diop?
I think so, yeah. I mean, and even the fundamentals of sociology might have to be different for us, maybe, And it is in pursuing that effort, I think, that we can get there.
I think this takes us to a question that has kind of been the whole conversation in a way, which is debates around decolonization, the ongoing debates or the ongoing struggle to actually decolonize. And I want to distinguish that from the decolonial necessarily, right? I think is a pretty rigorous and technical set of concepts that are often deployed. But I think both of us, maybe for similar, maybe for different reasons, don't necessarily identify with that kind of decolonial school.
Yeah.
But the problem that you've just highlighted, right, that there are incredibly important works for understanding this space that is modern Senegal for example, Abdoulaye Badr Diop, that has not really been transmitted even among the students of the scholar himself. And their justification is interesting, right? That they were busy teaching the fundamentals of their discipline, right? As opposed to, for example, transmitting an understanding of their society. So their task as professors of sociology was to teach sociology. And so it makes me think that if university-based academics, or perhaps not university-based, understand their commitment not to a form of knowledge, a discipline, but to something else, then that's actually probably a key.
Yeah. What I think the task of scholars paid by the public in a place like Senegal is to be, I think far beyond cultivating disciplines, it should be to contribute in self-reflection, right? Like rigorous, sharp, critical self-reflection, which is what Weber did for Europe, self-reflection.
Is how we got Weber in the first place, how we got the fundamentals of the discipline.
Yeah, that's what he was doing, self-reflecting on himself and his people.
If we were to put that task and that project at the center of...
And in his tongue, I have to add that too.
In his tongue.
Self-reflecting about the collective he belonged to, although like embedding it into a broader historical frame and broader scope, like universal history, but in his tongue also. I think that's very important. Drawing from earlier intellectual resources, traditions, alphabets of concepts, to quote Kaviraj, right? So yeah, I think all that, Sudipta Kaviraj, right? Like they start up with a repository of concepts, ordinary language concepts, or stuff that they take from other fields, whether biological sciences, theology, law, whatever, right? But they draw from a stock of concepts that are present in their society, and they objectify them. They work with them, in order to critically reflect that life world that they are a part of.
Objectify them and invest in them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So, it makes me think of some other books that are undoubtedly somewhere in these boxes that we won't get through today. This Ngugi wa Thiong'o, right? In this sense of the kinds of investments that it took into European vernaculars, right? To make them the languages that they are today.
No.
But that needs to happen in African languages.
And the impulse for that was maybe partly commercial. Why is it that the vernaculars became languages of publications and eventually philosophy, high literature, so on, ended up being written in the vulgar tongue, as they used to say, rather than in Latin? One might say that, okay, there was commercial interest into that, but also they wanted to speak to broader audiences. Descartes wants to speak to a broader audience.
Just to go back to what you express as being the vocation, if you will, of an intellectual, an academic in an institution within a place like Senegal, what would placing such a commitment at the center of the African university to come look like in very practical institutional terms in your mind?
My sense is that the early years of independence made that possible. In Dakar, like the whole Dakar school was part of that history of self-examination by a scholarly class, right? It was an episode of that, right? But then as African Makerere, what Walter Rodney and others were busy doing in Tanzania, the school of Ibadan and so on, mostly in history here I'm speaking, right? But yeah, like there were spaces, or even the Codesria at a certain point, spaces that nurtured scholars that were in a position to do that. And ultimately, it's the sort of, how to put it, la paupérisation, right, de nos institutions. The fact that the most talented have a high incentive to leave and teach elsewhere and do research elsewhere, right? And write grants for donors outside of the continent that have other research questions, I suppose. I think detracts us from that. So what will be needed is finding a way to ground our brightest, most motivated minds on the continent and give them the means to actually do just that, rather than be invested into consulting in order to live decently.
So what I hear in that is grounding.
Yeah, grounding.
The practice of grounding, the Walter Rodney, guerrilla intellectual who goes out beyond the university.
And I think scholars also have to be understood by the broader public. Like that, and that can happen the moment when their works is assimilated. There are some mediations that are made between the work of Abdoulaye Bara Diop, for instance, and the broader public. I don't know if you've heard of this popular TV show in Senegal called Bete Bete.
No, I haven't.
It's about the caste system.
Okay.
It's very popular. And many Senegalese today are reflecting critically into the caste system through that TV show. I've watched a couple of episodes and I feel like it could have been so much better and more accurate if they actually had read Abdoulaye Bara Diop, right? And so those type of mediations are lacking.
Mediations as in...
Yeah, how to take scholarship into other spaces.
So really working
other audiences. Yeah, the more level of form. Yeah, but one also needs like different cultural workers to intervene at different stages of that process of mediation.
It can't be is inherently not an individual enterprise.
No, there needs to be an understanding of there is a social utility to scholars in the humanities and the social sciences, and the broader public needs to be reminded that in one way or another. If not, like it won't happen, right? Yeah. That space where we can nurture that type of work will be vanishing under our feet, and the only thing that we can do is look for some kind of foreign funding, which has more or less been the case.
Well, much like Walter Benjamin's essay that we started with, Unpacking My Library, this conversation has gone in many different directions that one couldn't have anticipated from the outset. And so it's been a pleasure. Unfortunately, we've only gotten about 1/10 of the way through the boxes, but that's okay. As we're wrapping up the episode and thinking about libraries and books and institutions, what are you thinking about?
I would have loved to see more of these boxes. In a way, I'm curious to see them all and come up with some broad portrait of the intellectual company that you've been keeping these last years. Yeah. There is something that starts to take shape. I'm curious to see more of it. And there is something also that I was thinking about as we were going through the books. Like, I feel like one's library is both a description of one's past, but also the space that will be generative for future endeavors. It's both the work that you've already done, the mind that you've shaped in conversation with these different works as of yet, but also a stepping stone to other projects. I would have been curious for you to, okay, this is what I've been working with, and this is what I want to carry with me as I move towards the coming years.
Well, we'll have to save that for another episode.
Yeah.
I look forward to your next trip to Bengurir.
Inshallah.
And we can keep that conversation going.
Yeah. Thanks, Wendell. And to the next one.
All right. Thanks, Mamadou.
You'll do the same at my library.
Inshallah.